Hello and welcome to the Nexus. Today's show, the US president calls him Little Rocket Man, and North Koreans call him Supreme Leader, of course. It's Kim Jong Un. Here in the Nexus, we're going to be focusing on three things. Kim versus Trump. Both men are making threats, both calling each other madmen. Could they drag us all into a third world war? The Kim dynasty, this family has ruled North Korea as if they were gods for 3 generations. How do they get away with it? And inside the DPRK, a photographer will be showing us the pictures he smuggled out of the world's most secretive nation. That's all ahead here in the Nexus.
The greatest immediate threat to the United States and to the world is the threat posed by the rogue regime in North Korea and his continued efforts to develop a long-range nuclear capability.
North Korea launched an intercontinental ballistic missile. It went higher than any previous shots they've taken.
We can't have madmen out there shooting rockets all over the place.
No matter what Trump says, I think North Korea's current trajectory for escalating provocation has been predetermined already.
The preparation for this had to precede anything that was happening in recent weeks in U.S.-North Korea relations.
Rocket Man should have been handled a long time ago.
We could easily have a huge conventional war, which could kill upwards of 2 million people.
Nobody's going to mess with our people.
If North Korea continues to underestimate or miscalculate the firm resolve of the international community, it will transpire to be a grave mistake.
If an all-out war happened, you would literally have at least hundreds of thousands of people dead. In fact, you could have that even from one single nuclear explosion.
If war comes, make no mistake, the North Korean regime will be utterly destroyed.
We can't just focus on North Korea.
China must show leadership and follow through.
We really need a comprehensive approach that looks at the bigger set of issues involving the United States and China, China and Japan, Russia.
中方也一贯反对任何导致局势紧张化的行为。
Donald Trump can be engaged in rhetoric as much as he likes, but in real life he can do very little.
Rocket Man is on a suicide mission for himself and for his regime. The United States is ready, willing, and able, but hopefully this will not be necessary.
Well, are we on the verge of a nuclear war? Let's try to work it out with our 3 guests. We have the photographer, Michael Hunowitz, who visited North Korea in 2015 and smuggled out his photos, which he'll be sharing with us in just a moment. We also have Hyun Lee, a writer and activist originally from South Korea, now a US citizen. And we also have Robert Kelly, a political analyst who lives in South Korea with his family. Robert, we're going to get into the analysis in just a moment, but in a word, are you predicting a nuclear war?
No, I'm not.
Okay, let's get into it. Why not? Why are you so sure there won't be one?
Sure. The North Koreans are not building nuclear weapons to strike the United States or South Korea or Japan preemptively. That would lead to a conflict which they would lose. That's been pretty well established now for several decades. So if there is going to be a conflict, it would be initiated by the United States as a preemptive strike, something along the lines of what happened in Iraq. I highly doubt the president would do that. At the very least, he would need the cooperation of South Korea to do that, and the South Korean government is implacably opposed to that. Okay. So I doubt the United States can attack North Korea without its allies.
So why doesn't Kim Jong Un just give those reassurances? Why is he trying to build a nuclear weapon that could reach the United States?
I think he wants direct deterrence against the United States. That is to say that being able to strike Japan and South Korea is not enough. They're not American citizens. That matters less in the American political calculus. So if he can directly strike an American city, the deterrent capabilities of North Korea are improved. And they've actually been quite blunt about this. The North Koreans have told us repeatedly in talks and negotiations that if Gaddafi had nuclear weapons, he'd still be alive. And that's why they want
You're absolutely right, Robert. That's why we've got this little picture here of Kim Jong Un in the middle of Muammar Gaddafi and Saddam Hussein. And in fact, we have got something that Kim Jong Un said in response to the threat from Donald Trump at the United Nations. Here's what he had to say. His remarks have convinced me, rather than frightening or stopping me, that the path I choose is correct and that it is the one I have to follow to the last. So, Robert, you think that's quite a rational statement there by Kim Jong Un, presumably?
Well, he doesn't want us to attack him, and the single best way to deter an attack from an outside power is nuclear weapons. We don't like that, but there's a logic there, and that's why they've pursued them. They've been very clear about that. It's unfortunate they have them, but it's very obvious why they want them.
All right, let's go to Hyun Lee now. She's originally from South Korea, now living in the United States. Hyun, when you look at this current administration, Donald Trump, why is it that he's suddenly ramping things up compared to Obama?
Yeah, I agree with everything that Mr. Kelly has said. And I also just want to add that the threat of war in Korea has been there for the past 65 years. And at the root of the current crisis is the ongoing Korean War that never ended because in 1953, the US and North Korea signed an armistice, which is a temporary ceasefire. It is not a permanent peace treaty. So the two sides have technically been at war ever since for the past 65 years. The US, as we all know, maintains 28,500 troops in the South. At one point, it had hundreds of tactical nuclear weapons.
Okay, why do you think Trump seems to be changing gears compared to Obama? He's really confronting Kim Jong Un directly.
Is that people in Korea, particularly in the North, have lived with the threat of war for the past 65 years. So that is nothing new. The only reason why people in the West are now suddenly getting interested in the issue, and this issue is getting international attention, is because North Korea has developed a missile that is capable of striking the United States.
You're right.
So
right.
we
Actually,
pay attention.
You have a point there, and we have a little bit more to hear, so to speak, from Kim Jong Un. Here's a little bit more of that statement he gave. Whatever Trump might have expected, he will face results beyond his expectation. I will surely and definitely tame the mentally deranged US dotard with fire. Apart from the very humorous phrasing from Kim Jong Un and people having to look up the word dotard, but this is, I mean, his threats are very strong. Do you think they're real?
We should also note that after last week's missile test, Kim Jong Un also said that their nuclear weapons are aimed solely at defending their sovereignty from the US nuclear threat, and meaning that it's meant to be a deterrence. And what that suggests to me is that the surest way that the US can remove the so-called North Korean threat is by removing its own nuclear threat against North Korea.
Okay. Well, let's bring in Michael Hunowitz now. Michael, you went to North Korea in 2015. What was it like, and why did you go in the first place?
That's right. I went to North Korea as a tourist, and I took quite a lot of pictures. North Korea was an absolutely fascinating place for me to visit. It makes your job as a photographer difficult because you are controlled at all times. There are many places where you cannot take pictures, but at the same time it makes your job easy because virtually every picture you take in North Korea is interesting. People will look at it and they will try to read through the lines, understand what's really happening in this picture. They will try to see through what the North Koreans want you to believe.
We'll come back to your photographs in a little bit, Michael, but Hyun, just to go back to something else that you mentioned before we got to air, so to speak. You said that the South Koreans and the Americans, with their military exercises, are provoking and making things worse.
Yes. Right now, as we speak, they are conducting military exercises. Vigilant Ace is an Air Force exercise that deploys 12,000 U.S. personnel and also hundreds of aircraft, including stealth jets, F-22s, and B-1B bombers that are designed to drop nuclear bombs in North Korea. These tests happen all the time, multiple times a year. And these are massive war games. And from the North Korean perspective, every time these happen, they don't know if it is just an exercise or
Okay.
if it's actually a prelude to the real thing.
Okay, it's quite unsettling, I
And-
guess. But Howard, we're going to just have one more question now for Robert before we move on. Robert, clearly this would be a completely asymmetrical fight between North Korea and the United States. But North Korea may have on its side China. What does China want out of all this situation?
I think China primarily wants to prevent the unification of Korea because they don't want a unified nationalist democratic Korea on their border. And so the Chinese continue to prop up North Korea primarily instrumentally. I don't believe there's any kind of meaningful ideology, communist or otherwise.
And why wouldn't they want the democratic, reunified North Korea?
Because, well, then you've got 75 million Koreans. Koreans are pretty nationalistic. There are arguments that maybe Korea would have some kind of redentist claim on northeastern China. I don't actually believe that myself, but you hear this thrown around. And generally speaking, I mean, if you're China, why do you want another large, unified, industrialized state on your border? You don't. So they instrumentalize North Korea. They use it. I mean, the Chinese will tell you this. I mean, you go to conferences, and the guys from the PLA, the People's Liberation Army, will say we see North Korea as a buffer, and they use that word.
So
right? I mean,
China
North Korea's
basically
not an
wants
ally,
the
it's just
status quo. Is that right?
That's correct.
Oh dear. Okay. Well, let's look at the Kim dynasty now. And for 3 generations, this family has ruled North Korea as if they were gods. It's a family drama that's an intoxicating mix of fact and fiction. The Kim dynasty is the only show in town, and North Koreans never miss an episode. The family has ruled this country since it was split from the South 70 years ago. Kim Il-sung, Kim Jong-il, and now Kim Jong Un. Different generations, but with much in common. All 3 leaders have developed a personality cult. A portrait of the first 2 hangs side by side in every office, home and public building in the country. There are 35,000 statues of Kim Il-sung alone, one for every 750 people. The pro-Kim propaganda penetrates deep into the North Korean psyche. When Kim Il-sung died in 1994, the nation appeared to be devastated. Similar scenes in 2011, when his son Kim Jong-il died. Kim Jong Un wept as he accompanied his father's coffin. It's widely reported that people who didn't mourn enough were sent to labor camps. Like his father and grandfather, Kim Jong Un can be ruthless. He had his uncle and mentor Yang Song-taek executed in 2013, apparently for being a counter-revolutionary. He's also suspected of having his half-brother assassinated at an airport in Malaysia in February. The defense minister is just one of several high-ranking officials to be executed. He was killed in 2015 with an anti-aircraft gun in front of an audience. Secrecy is another Kim trademark. Kim Jong-il never gave a public speech the whole time he was in charge, 17 years. It's not even possible to be certain about where and when he was born. Kim Jong-un also likes to keep his cards close to his chest. For example, he does have a wife, but very little is known about their relationship. It's not even clear how many children they have. Like all self-respecting dynasties, the Kims love to splash out on themselves. The 34-year-old supreme leader has an estimated fortune of $5 billion, reportedly spending hundreds of millions each year on yachts, watches, luxury cars, imported food, and entertainment. Unbelievable when you consider the average annual income in North Korea is barely $1,800. This is a real-life dynasty, and who knows how much longer the Kims will continue to run the show. Well, extraordinary. Let's go to Robert Kelly now in Busan in South Korea. Robert, when you look at the luxurious lifestyle the Kims enjoy, why is it the population seems to just accept it?
Yeah, this is actually a big debate inside the Korean analyst community. My own sense is it's simply out of fear of the willingness of the Kim family to do anything to survive. They will repress anyone. They let 10% of their population starve to death in the late 1990s rather than accept conditions on food aid. The Kims are extraordinarily brutal. That's why everyone's so afraid of them having nuclear weapons. I think the Kims are rational, but they're extraordinarily dangerous, and I would argue they're the most dangerous state ever to own nuclear weapons. But no, they'll just shoot as many people as they need to survive.
When you look at the Arab Spring, for example, in Tunisia, when people don't have work, they don't have food, eventually they rise up and overthrow the regime. It takes a long time, but then again, the Kims have been in charge for a long time. How much longer have they got?
Several decades, at least. I think North Korea is actually more stable than people think it is. People have been predicting a revolt in North Korea for several decades. I think we need to get used to the fact that North Korea is going to be here for a while. I think South Korea needs to reconfigure itself a lot around how to deal with this problem rather than waiting for it to go away. The Kims are not going anywhere. The transition from Kim Jong-il to Kim Jong Un was the time that the regime might collapse. A lot of people thought this would happen 4 or 5 years ago, and it didn't. So
a few more decades. It's an extraordinary prospect. Let's go to Hyun Lee now. Hyun Lee, why do you think the North Koreans are, do you think they're aware, for example, of what's going on in their country and how their country compares to the South, your old country?
Well, I don't think any one of us on this panel are qualified to speak for North Koreans. I've traveled there, and based on my limited interaction with North Koreans, I can say that the people at least I've spoken to, seem to express great reverence for the country's founding leaders. They fought against colonial Japan for Korea's independence. And the people there have great pride in the fact that they have been able to fight off many external pressures, the Japanese before World War II, and then the United States since the Korean War. They are proud of the fact that they are still standing.
What do the North Koreans do to get all the money that they do have, which isn't a lot, but it seems to go to the top very much? What do they do in terms of trade, for example, and who do they trade with?
Well, they can't trade with many people because of the many layers and decades of sanctions that have been placed on North Korea. And that has been one of the demands of North Korea for many years, is to normalize relations so that they can have normal trade relations with other countries. The point that I'm trying to make is that even if there are people in North Korea who disagree with their leadership, as there are in every country, that does not mean that the U.S. has a right to go in there and bomb them or collapse their regime by any other means.
Just pause there for a moment. We're going to bring back in Michael, the photographer who went to North Korea in 2015 and smuggled out his photographs. We've got a couple we want to show our viewers, Michael. One in particular of empty shops. Now, it looks quite a dull photograph, but actually it's quite revealing, isn't it?
Yes, can I just say I am probably partially to blame as far as the money situation of North Korea goes, because if you want to go to North Korea, you have to pay them quite a lot of money to be allowed in. So it's also people like me who effectively support that regime financially, whether we want it or not.
Oh, okay. Now the photograph that we're talking about, the empty shop?
The empty shop photograph, it's a photograph I took in Pyongyang. I had about 15 seconds to take that picture. You were not allowed to go in there. It was purely for North Koreans. And usually we were surrounded by guards. There was one in the front, one in the back. But at that particular moment, both of them were in the front. So there was an opportunity to go into that shop for a brief moment and take a picture. As you can see, there's very little in there. You can make out the prices. Everything is rather expensive.
And it was a very popular photograph. It went viral on the internet, apparently.
It did go viral. It was the first picture of mine to go viral after I published them. So it had about 2 million views in about an hour, perhaps.
We have another photograph of China on the right and North Korea on the left. You took that from a bridge.
That's right. This is a bridge that links North Korea and China in the Chinese city of Dandong. Whether you have a visa or not, you can walk on that bridge, and you can also take a boat tour. Even if you don't have a visa, you can go on a boat tour. You can go inside North Korea a little bit, take some pictures, and come back. On the left-hand side in that picture, you see North Korea. There's hardly anything there to look at. On the right-hand side, you have China with its impressive buildings. And at night, the Chinese side is brilliant with lights, whereas on the North Korean side, there is just darkness.
Okay, thank you, Michael. Well, it's not the only strange thing in North Korea. As we've heard countless times, North Korea, the world's most secretive nation, but it's really more accurate to say that the regime's keeping its people cut off from the rest of the world. And in fact, there are many very weird things going on there. But here's our top 5 bizarre facts about North Korea. In at 5, law and order. The smallest things can get you arrested in North Korea, even talking about the regime, so always be positive. Don't sport a wild haircut, and avoid wearing jeans. They can get you into serious trouble too. And if you are convicted, it's not just about you, it's your entire family who could pay the price. The 3 generations rule means your children's children could end up in an internment camp. Up next, media. The media in North Korea is highly regulated. There are 3 state-controlled TV channels, and that's it. This jolly lady has been proudly informing loyal servants for more than 40 years.
세용의 대륙간 탄도 로켓 시험 발사.
And you can forget about expanding your horizons online. There is no access to the World Wide Web in North Korea unless you're one of a handful of very special officials. But people can look at a few state-run websites where you can learn more about the Supreme Leader and pick up some more Korean cooking tips. His people might be discouraged from all things Western, but Kim Jong Un isn't as strict on himself. He loves all things basketball and is friends with Dennis Rodman.
Happy birthday to you.
At 3, elections. It may be the world's most famous totalitarian state, but that doesn't mean there aren't elections. It is the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, after all, but choice on the ballot is limited. Just one person, selected by the regime, is allowed to run in each district. When it comes to selecting the leader, yeah, you guessed it, not much choice there either. Voting might be futile, but not taking part is considered an act of treason and is said to be a means for the regime to determine if anyone is missing. At 2, Father Time. It might be 2017 for much of the world, but not in North Korea. It's the year 106. That's because North Korea's calendar starts with the birth of Kim Jong Un's grandfather. So, North Korea's year 1 was in 1912, when Kim Il-sung, the great leader, was born. And in the top spot, tourism. North Koreans are forbidden to leave the country without the regime's permission, so people have to make the most of domestic attractions. Whilst there are several resorts in North Korea, including a ski resort, the most popular tourist attraction in the country is a visit to the tombs of leaders past, embalmed and perfectly preserved. A reminder to the people, if one was needed, of their divine and eternal leadership. Well, extraordinary. Let's go to Robert Kelly now, who's in South Korea. Robert, I mean, I'm not sure how many of those are apocryphal tales and how many of them are actually genuine laws and restrictions, but what is it about North Korea that develops and fosters these kinds of rather strange customs?
Well, I think most of that was roughly accurate. I mean, I've been to North Korea myself, and I've been working on this issue for a long time, and I didn't really see any big errors there or anything like that. I think the thing that most interests people, or most people find sort of bizarre or sort of unreal about North Korea, surreal or whatever, is the level the personality cult. It's the most servile there ever was. It exceeds anything that Stalin or Mao ever did. We know the East Bloc diplomats during the Cold War used to complain about this. Actually, as early as the 1960s, people from the Soviet Union and Eastern Europe said that the Kims were kind of going overboard with the statues everywhere. Actually, one of the reasons why those 2 statues you mentioned there, one of the reasons why they're bronze and not gold is because they were originally plated with gold, and it was so expensive, the Soviet patrons of the North Koreans forced them to remove the gold. I think that's the kind of thing that really sort of sends you over the top. You go to North Korea, and they really do treat the 2 dead leaders like they're sort of these semi-divine figures. They're sort of all over the place. You got photographs everywhere. You got statues and stuff like that. You go to museums, and they say, like, Kim Il-sung stood here, and there's like a rope around it. They put like casts on his feet and things like that, and he sat here, and they'll sort of carve the chair out and put it under glass. And that's what really Yeah, and I mean, when you go to North Korea, they don't actually call it North Korea very frequently. The guards often refer to it as Kim country, Kim Nara, it's a Korean word for it. I mean, which is basically land of the Kims.
So
and I think that's what really surprises people, because it doesn't really look like Marxism or Confucianism. It looks like some like weird feudal fiefdom.
More like a sort of a royal family in a way. I mean, it's part of the reason why, as you say, they have a chance of staying in for decades. Let's go to Michael really quickly for one final thing. Michael, you've been keeping aside a photograph from the media. You've just got one that you haven't released before, and you've saved it for us. Can you show it to us? Okay, now what does that show then?
This is it. This is a picture of two North Korean soldiers at the DMZ, demilitarized zone. As you can see, they are quite skinny. The South Korean counterparts will be taller. They will weigh twice as much. And they don't convey any authority. They don't look very threatening.
Thank you so much for your insight there and for giving us a chance to look at your photographs today. Thank you very much to Michael Hunowitz. Also, thank you to Hyun Lee. Appreciate your insight. And Robert Kelly, as ever, thank you also. Well, that is it for this episode. Next week, we're looking at another strong man from the East, someone who likes to ride horses bareback, does judo. He's been in power for a very long time and wants to stay there. Find out who he is next week on The Nexus.